What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? Hansberry's play takes its title from a line of Langston Hughes's poem, Harlem. The title proves appropriate as the younger family has many dreams they have been unable to bring to fruition, that have remained stoppered up. Through this tale of a family dealing with limited opportunities, Hansberry speaks to the hardships Americans and peoples of all countries often struggle with, but brings to light the additional obstacles many African Americans faced and continue to face while trying to achieve their piece of the American dream. Hansberry's play takes one specific, detailed family and manages to make its story of hardship universal. Through the youngers, we are able to see Hughes' hypothetical question play out as they strive to make their dreams become reality. So join me as we look into the life of Lorraine Hansberry, an artist who died far too young, but did manage to pose a partial answer to Hughes' question, what happens to a dream deferred? Lorraine Hansberry was born in 1930 and died in 1965. She was born into a middle-class family in Chicago as the youngest of 4 children. Her father, Carl, a realtor, was very involved in the black community. He supported the NAACP, ran for Congress, and served as a U.S. Marshal. Her mother, Nanny, was a former school teacher and was also involved in pressing for social change. Additionally, her uncle was a Howard University professor who had a college of the University of Nigeria named in his honor. So he would often bring African students back to the U.S. with him. Famous figures in the black community like Duke Ellington, Jesse Owens, and Joe Louis were just some of the celebrities who came to her house when she was a child. When she was 7, her family intentionally decided to move into an all-white neighborhood. Her father took their case all the way to the Supreme Court, where they won in Hansberry v. Lee. Despite this, Hansberry had a chunk of concrete barely miss her head when a mob attacked her house. Unfortunately, even though they did win at the Supreme Court, discriminatory housing practices still continued in Chicago, even if they were no longer sanctioned by law. They were still happening in practice. So if we take this all together, we can really see that Hansberry was very much steeped in the fight for equality from a very young age. She broke family tradition by attending the University of Wisconsin, rather than Howard University. And when she was in high school, she first became interested in theater, but this interest continued and expanded when she attended the University of Wisconsin. Even though she did have an interest in theater that grew while she was in college, she eventually left the university to pursue a writing career in New York, after she spent a few years also studying painting. While in New York, she was involved in a variety of liberal political causes. And during one of the many protests she attended, she met a fellow writer, Robert Nemiroff, and the two married in 1953. Nemiroff was very supportive and encouraging about her writing, recognizing Hansberry's genius and ability, but the two actually divorced a year before her death, though they continued to remain close, collaborative partners, both in their work and as friends after that. And Hansberry had written essays for writing A Raisin in the Sun, but that was her first major work. It was very successful when it was produced on Broadway and highly acclaimed when it came to the stage in 1959. With the production of A Raisin in the Sun, Hansberry became the first African-American woman to have a play produced on Broadway. She was also the youngest and first black artist to receive the New York Drama Critics Circle Award. The director of A Raisin in the Sun, Lloyd Richards, became the first black man to direct a Broadway play. So A Raisin in the Sun really was kind of groundbreaking and revolutionary in multiple ways. At the time of its release, though, there was controversy over whether or not this was a quote-unquote black play, because it deals with such universal themes. Some critics suggested the play would have been unsuccessful or even very poorly written had it featured white characters, which was proof in their eyes of its simplicity. Yet many other viewers and critics disagreed, including Hansberry, who saw the race of the characters as integral to the story she was telling, and who always kind of viewed it as an attempt to examine some of these prejudiced practices in housing. The original title of A Raisin in the Sun was actually The Crystal Stair, which is a reference to another Langston Hughes poem. And Hansberry actually wrote 2 screenplay versions of A Raisin in the Sun when Columbia Pictures bought the film rights. Apparently these versions offer a more detailed view of the ghetto the youngers live in, kind of really showing the squalor, poverty they live in, and has even more of a social message behind it. It also includes kind of more examples of racist interactions and sort of this uncomfortable, tense atmosphere they live in, adding in more examples of racial inequality and poverty, making the story more overtly political, Columbia Pictures, though, chose to avoid this controversial material and went with a more straightforward adaptation that was much closer to the play itself. Before her death, she wrote a second, less successful play called The Sign in Sidney Brustein's Window, which actually closed on Broadway the day she died of cancer at the age of 35. This play dealt with a white Jewish intellectual living in Greenwich Village, and many critics were surprised by her choice of subject matter, but Hansberry refused to be pigeonholed, and unfortunately it was much less successful than her first play. And even while in her sickbed when she was suffering from cancer, Hansberry continued to attend events and give speeches, and continued to contribute to the civil rights movement. Unfortunately, she did eventually succumb to cancer, and her ex-husband Robert Nemiroff published some of her unfinished plays and other writings after her death, determined to help her literary legacy continue.